Number 3, Joseph Smith was a false prophet. The book of Deuteronomy says a false prophet leads people away from the true God and fails to predict the future. Joseph Smith was guilty on both of these counts. So we should not believe that God used a false prophet like him to transmit inspired revelation. In his History of the Church, Joseph Smith prophesied that Jesus Christ would return sometime in the 19th century and that the government of the United States would be overthrown, both of which, of course, didn't happen. Mormons like to say Joseph Smith predicted the Civil War 30 years before it happened, but anyone at the time knew there were troubles between the North and the South. Smith also predicted that, quote, war will be poured out upon all nations, beginning at this place. But no other nations fought in the American Civil War, which shows this was a false prophecy. And Smith definitely led people away to believe in false gods. At the funeral for Elder King Follett, Joseph Smith said, God himself was once as we are now, and is an exalted man, and sits enthroned in yonder heavens. According to the book of Abraham, which Smith also allegedly translated, God is a superpowered man who rules near a star or planet named Kolob. If Mormons are faithful enough, they too can become gods and rule over their own universes alongside the spouses they married in this life. But this contradicts the central truth about God. The Creator is not and never has been a creature. The omnipotent God can become man, or assume a human nature along with his divine nature, but man cannot become God. The fact that Smith taught the contrary means he is a false prophet. And speaking of the book of Abraham, Smith claimed he translated an ancient papyrus written in Abraham's own hand that talks about the gods creating the world. But even Mormon Egyptologists agree that the papyrus was simply a collection of 2nd century Egyptian funerary texts, and they say nothing about Abraham, and they certainly weren't written by him. Now, some Mormon apologists say Joseph Smith was just using the papyri to help him write down visions he had. But in his own diary, Joseph Smith claimed to have translated that document. He even wrote an Egyptian alphabet and grammar to help him translate, even though he wasn't actually doing that now that we've checked the original papyrus. But it's not only the book of Abraham that reveals Joseph Smith was a false prophet. This is a model of the golden plates, 2/3 of which were sealed and allegedly couldn't be opened. That means there were at most 40 plates, each 6 by 8 inches, that were supposed to have contained information present in the 270,000 English words of the Book of Mormon. In order to contain that information, every character on one of these plates would have to represent 80 words. But ancient hieroglyphics don't work like that. Actual ancient metal plates, like the plates of Darius, only contain about 200 words per page. Smith's claim that the reformed Egyptian writing on these golden plates were simply part of his own imagination. In 1828, Martin Harris offered to assist Smith in the translation of the plates, but Harris lost 116 pages of the translated manuscript that Smith gave him. Smith claimed that God was angry at the loss of the pages and would only allow Smith to translate from another set of plates. These plates told the same story as the original manuscripts, but from a slightly different perspective. Of course, if Smith were just dictating the story from memory and not actually translating it, it would have been nearly impossible for him to reproduce what he originally dictated to Harris and prove he was not a prophet. Smith even describes in his book Doctrine and Covenants how his critics would have used the loss of the pages to try and prove that he was not miraculously translating the golden plates, and so he was not a prophet. Finally, Smith did what many false prophets have done throughout history. He used his status to acquire power, such as by becoming a town mayor, running for president of the United States, and acquiring multiple wives for himself, some as young as 14 years old. Smith lied to his wife about 2 of them, sisters Emily and Eliza Partridge. And one Mormon apologist admits, it is certainly true that Joseph did not disclose all of his plural marriages precisely when they happened. That's one way to put it. Smith also ordered a printing press to be destroyed for publishing works that were critical of him. He was later arrested in connection to this act and died in a shootout using a gun smuggled into the jail where he was being held. Joseph Smith was not a true prophet who died a martyr's death. He was a false prophet who met the ignoble end of so many other false prophets throughout